today, I was sort of poking around how I wanted to phrase it. And it really comes out of the book that, the Developreneur book that I wrapped up at the last second of last year. It literally has a December 31st, publishing date. And it was, really with that, as I tried to just distill the conversations we've had for the last couple of years on the Developreneur, the mentor classes, on some of the posts, on the things that we've had, like lunch meetings and other stuff. And then even before any of this sort of came together, just some of the conversations of how do you really advance your career? What is maybe like it's hard to say the best, but at least for me, what I would recommend as the best way to have a developer career where you're successful, where you get where you need to be, and how to be somebody that sort of sticks out from the crowd. Particularly now, as the crowd has gotten bigger, there's a lot of people in the IT world that are doing developer jobs, but developers probably in quotes, because they're not really, to me, they're not traditional developers, and they don't have necessarily some of the core knowledge to be a developer. They're more like script masters or something like that, where they can write some JavaScript or maybe do some HTML, but the core foundational stuff about programming, about like memory management and loops and performance and all the things that are, to me, what makes a professional developer over like just a hack. Those things are, they are definitely distinguishing skills to have now if you want a job and you want to advance in a career. But then you have to, there's some things you got to do to sort of separate yourself from the noise. And so I'm labeling this essentially the better developer philosophy. It's really to try to lay out the underlying philosophy or ideas that have come about from talking about this whole developreneur thing, and how do you build better developers? How do you, for yourself, make yourself better? But then also, how do you put stuff in place if you're like managing a team or creating a team or creating a product, and then you're going to have some people work on it? Is how do you, up the game of everybody involved? And so that's what this presentation is about. I figure it's a good one as we start the year, maybe get some, a few ideas percolating in the back of your mind of some ways to improve your approach to things the next year, and some checklist items for us to say, okay, am I still doing this? Is this how I approach my day-to-day job? So there's several things, but I really want to focus on 5 areas of the philosophy that we bring about a lot, and as a good way to sort of set the stage for this is what we're looking to do, and this is how we think we're going to become better developers. First one is steady progress. Want to be able to provide value. This is a tough thing, but I just labeled it more than a developer. So it's not just, and by that it really comes back to, you're not just writing code, and we'll get a little deeper into that. Finishing touches, and this is being a professional, really. It's, it seems it's almost like bluntly put, but really at the end of the day, it has to do with just actually, taking pride in your work and putting those finishing touches on that you need to do. And for us, it's hard. The caveat to that, or a side note on that, is I know it's very hard because there's that, we called it like over the years, it's either the 80 or the 90 or 99% high, where you're just like almost there and you're just like pushing and driving to finish some project. And there's always, with that, there's a little bit of a temptation too, to just be like, okay, done. Just cut a corner here or do something off so you can just say it's done and you can move on with it, particularly if it's been a long project. So it is, one of the things we want to do is make sure that we actually follow the work completely through to completion. And then communication and presentation, which is a huge part, even though it doesn't traditionally is not seen as a part of IT, but really it is. And I think that's where a lot of people fall short. That's where a lot of people are, I'll call them coders, and never really become developers, because they lack the communication and presentation skills that are needed to advance into those senior and beyond level roles. So it's working first with steady progress. It's sort of self-explanatory, but to just sort of lay out things, and this is especially, again, since we're at the beginning of a year, and you really could do this at the beginning of any chunk of time, whether you want to do it quarterly or a monthly or something like that. And some of these need to be on a bigger scale than a month. They're probably a quarter or an annual kind of thing. And first one is an excellent example of that. Adding new skills. As a developer, if you're going to be a better developer, you have to add new skills, because the climate, the landscape is changing all the time. There's always new languages out there. There's always new tools out there and libraries and everything else. I mean, we can look at the nuggets that we bring to the mentor class. We've done this for whatever it is, 60, 70, 80 meetings, bringing a couple of new nuggets every time. And they just keep coming. There's still stuff out there. There's a whole lot of stuff that we haven't touched, because there's just always new stuff that's out there to learn. And so it's not just adding new skills, is not just being able to read a summary of something and say, oh, that's out there. It's being able to actually utilize it as a tool and be able to apply it to solve whatever problems we need to. It's like just this week, there was an article that came out about, and of course, it's the beginning of the year, so it's one of those top 10 list kind of things, but it was whatever it was. I think it was 10 reasons why you need to learn Python this year. Python didn't exist, however, I guess now it's probably about 10, 15 years ago, but it is one of those things that was like a little sort of a niche language. And then it is just it steadily has increased and increased and increased. And there's definitely some areas, there's certain problems that Python just works really well to solve. And so if you're in those industries, then you really need to learn, Python. But along the way, you also have, new releases of Java, and Microsoft keeps doing stuff out in that world. So there's all the .NET languages that are making improvements. So you've got to be able to add those new skills. But along the way, you got to be able to improve on your current skills, because those libraries, those challenges are still advancing as well. So being able to do a small little app for a solution may have worked 10 years ago, but now you have to think of things like, does this need to be web enabled? How many users are going to need to be able to see this? Because it's probably not going to be just one or two users like we had in the past, where you had a desktop application that you'd install. Now you have to worry about, well, they want the whole department to be able to see it, or they want people outside of the department to see reports, or all of these changing requirements means we aren't going to be able to just rest on our laurels and stick to the skills we have. We will find ourselves pretty much useless, fairly quickly as things move along. Steady progress definitely includes, along the way, the same kind of thing, is trying new things, getting out there, and instead of, constantly doing, let's say, like a customer contact application, do something new, do something that's maybe out in the finance world, or try something that requires you use a database instead of files, or a web app versus desktop. There's a lot of stuff out there. None of us can know everything. So part of the steady progress is steadily adding new things that we've done, new problems we've at least attempted. And then with that is being able to solve those new problems. Is let's take our skills and our new skills and our improved skills and some of these new things that we've tried out within a language or a framework or a platform, and be able to use that to solve new problems, whether it's an old problem that is now just bigger and more complex, going from one user to hundreds of users simultaneously, or whether it's a whole new problem, that could come about from like the Internet of Things or some of the other, hot topics that are out there, or security, is always out there. There's always new problems popping up that people need to solve as well. And then with that, along with being able to do new things and advance, part of it too is being able to master solutions and best practices. So problems that have been around for a while, especially stuff that shows up time and time again across different lines of business, is being able to really put together a solid, high quality solution, preferably quickly, because it's one of those things, you're going to see the problem over and over again. So there should be a point where now you've solved this problem so many times, it's like you can do it in your sleep, and you can do it following the best practices and avoiding all of the mistakes that you and other people have made along the way. The next one is adding value. Always. You want to be, if you're part of getting better, there's that personal, hey, I know more, I've got more skills, I can build out my resume. But really, at the end of the day, what matters is being able to add value to whatever it is that you're doing, wherever you've been hired or contracted or asked to work on stuff. Make sure that you bring a value to it, that you're, especially if you get paid, you should be giving the value you bring to the table should be more than you're getting paid. If you're paid $1 an hour, ideally you're bringing, $2 or $5 or $10 an hour of value to your customer or client. And in doing this, some of the things that are going to help you stand out and help you add value is make sure you understand the requirements like nobody else. It's like you should go into every project that you're a part of with a goal of saying, I'm going to understand this. I'm going to know the customer, what are their pain points, what are their requirements, and why are the requirements there? And by why, it's, are there like industry regulations? Are there internal politics? Are there customer requirements? Whatever it is, understand not only what's there, but why. And then with that, hopefully you're going to be able to offer solutions. And that's, I guess, not even, on top of that, but just in general also, you want to offer solutions, and the focus there is solutions. It doesn't help to be flashy, or it happens to be the latest, greatest technology, or cutting edge, or bleeding edge. And actually, in some cases, and maybe a lot of cases, that's the last thing. That's like the worst solution, would be a bleeding edge solution that ends up costing customer way more than they want to spend on it, and they never really get the value out of it. So, that better developer is understanding problems and how to offer solutions that are the best fit, for lack of a better term, for that problem. Part of being a better developer is being on the lookout for new problems to solve. At the end of the day, a developer, a coder writes code, a developer solves problems. And if you're going to be successful, particularly if you're going to be wildly successful, then you're going to have to find new problems to solve and be able to put together a solution. That's what every new product out there that's awesome is. I mean, somewhere somebody said, people have way too much free time on their hand, and so they created Candy Crush and said, well, let's just eat up a lot of time, or Angry Birds, stuff like that. And those are just the little ones. But then you also look at any major product, any flagship product in the commercial world. There's a couple of problems, or a problem or a couple that needed to be solved. That's how they launched their product. The nice thing about all of this is that as we talk about, getting better and learning more and finding more problems and solutions, all that, in doing this, it actually comes back to the top of the slide, that adding value always. If you're growing, if you're steadily improving, then your growth will add value to the team. Whatever you started with along the way, you're going to be adding more and more value. So it will help you, the bottom line of what you've given and with the value you've brought to the table is going to constantly get better if you can, if you keep down this path. The more than a developer thing, there's a lot of facets to it, but really to get to a little more like specific things is being able to write code faster. And by doing that, this goes back to understanding best practices and understanding tools and knowing what's out there and finding the right language or the right platform or the right framework for the work you're doing, using code generators and other tools, and just understanding what you're doing so that you're not having to fumble around and go search, well, I wonder how you do this, or I wonder how you do that. It's having that as second nature. As part of that, you're probably going to have higher quality output. But part of being a better developer is also getting into the habits of unit testing and all of the other different types of testing your code and doing code reviews and doing studying, learning new ways to improve the ability to, code and promote code into the various environments from development and stage and test and production, and being able to reproduce those in a way that the output, the code that you generate, is going to be a higher quality today than it was last year, and a year from now it's going to be even better. Understand the business. Nothing, it goes back to, I said, a coder writes code and a developer solve problems. Well, you want to solve problems that need to be solved, and that means you need to understand the business that you're in. Just understanding your technology and the languages is not enough. To be a better developer, you need to understand the business and what are their concerns. And it comes back again, I'm beating this drum quite a bit, but I think it is a huge part of it, is focus on solving problems. That, at the end of the day, is really what you're in there to do. And honestly, at the end of the day, if you're wired to become a developer, if you're doing what you were meant to do, you were destined to do, then you're a problem solver, because that's really what it is. And actually, from the developer side, I mean, if you think of what entrepreneurs do, they solve problems. And so that's where really the Developreneur idea came, is that these two things actually go hand in glove very well. And even better, if you're a developer, then you have tools to solve problems. You don't have to go hire somebody else or find somebody else. You could actually sit there and solve problems yourself, and we often do. Another thing that's I think gets sort of less pushed to the wayside a little bit more is understanding costs and benefits. It's, again, this goes back to where it's not just enough to solve the problem. You don't want to do it in a way that makes it more costly than it needs to be to whoever the end user or customer is. So understand the costs and the benefits of this stuff that you're doing, the tools that you're using, the frameworks, the licensing, and some of those kinds of things. You don't need to know it at a deep legal detailed level, but you should have at least a rough idea of what makes sense as an approach to any given problem. And that's one of the things that will really improve your value to your employer or your customers. So the finishing touches thing, this is an interesting one as I thought about it when we put it on the list, because we have talked in the past about I'll call it being able to complete something. Because there is this, it's a weird little dichotomy that we run into where we want to get a project done and get it out there and have people use it, but also we tend to putz around on it a little bit. We'll find little things, we'll find little improvements and tweaks, and we can drag something out forever by constantly making all these little polishing moves and stuff like that. But there is, you don't want to overdo it, but you do want to go the extra mile. You want to be able to provide a solution that not only is a solution, but it is a useful solution. It's easy to use, easy to learn, things like that. Don't just do the bare minimum to get there, unless if it's a minimum viable product. Okay, if you're trying to build an MVP, then you need to make that your focus. But even within that, you want to be able to find ways within the parameters of that MVP to make it the best MVP it can be. Whatever your constraints are, is taking a look at stuff and finding ways using your skills and your tools and your knowledge to squeeze a little bit more out of what you're doing and make it just that much more useful or valuable to whoever the end users are. The thing everybody hates as a finishing touch is comments and documentation, but I cannot emphasize enough how much that is a huge part of the better developer idea. It goes into, as we talked about, also a little bit communication and presentation, but if you write code that has crappy or incorrect comments or zero or very minimal documentation, no matter how good your code is, no matter how good the solution is, anybody that's looking at that is automatically it's going to be like a ding against you. And if you look at beginner, intermediate, and senior level developers, in particular, you'll usually find that the beginner developers, the documentation is sparse and not very useful. But particularly as they get into senior level developers, It's not necessarily that they document more often, but if they do, it is much more useful, much more thorough. You'll find, like examples included and stuff like that. And that is part of really delivering a high quality product. Spell checking and grammar seems to be such a nitpicky kind of thing, but particularly when we go back and look at comments and documentation created by developers, it is just amazing how often I find stuff that just is not grammatically correct. Stuff's misspelled all over the place. Even like variable names and stuff like that will be horribly misspelled, and it can be very distracting and confusing to deal with it. So, run your comments and stuff like that, run them through like a Grammarly or something like that, where you can at least do some spell checking and catch the basics. And actually a lot of IDEs now, Clips even, will flag stuff. I think Clips will flag stuff that it looks like it's misspelled, and, take advantage of those tools. Testing is one of those finishing touches that it just seems like most people don't get. They don't quite understand. How do you write tests? How do you create tests? And actually then, following through by creating unit tests and whatever other tests need to be done for their code. But I think that's a huge part of becoming better developers. Understand what a testing strategy is and get yourself into the habit of at least writing some basic tests to cover your code to avoid just the foolish mistakes that are the equivalent of like a typo or minor grammatical error in comments. And then in the finishing touches, this is where it does sort of get into that. You can take a long time with it, but it is details. So it's making sure that you have help where you need help, and you have ID values set properly and tag values set properly and closed properly, and you have your exceptions handled, and you have things logged properly, and it's all almost minutia, and it can be very time consuming, but that's the stuff that does really put that final finishing touch on it. Communication. This is like a big topic, obviously, or a big area, and you can and presentations have been done on it, books have been written on it, whole seminars have been done on it. You can probably do boot camp. Actually, I think you can get a degree based on essentially communication. But for our point of view, it's really keeping it simple. So number one is writing proper emails, is being able to write an email that's clear, that's concise, and somebody's going to read it and they're going to respond to it. You're going to be able to get your responses back. We still use, there's text and all this kinds of other stuff, but in the business world, the developer world, there are some wiki sites and that. There's some places that use wikis, but really, I think the majority of people still are going to communicate via email, particularly things that are complex ideas, other than like a quick, question or an answer. Typically, you're going to have a full-blown email. So make sure that you've got something that people look at it and they're going to read it, they're going to grasp it and be able to take whatever action you want them to take, as opposed to they look at it and then their eyes glaze over and they move on. A good example is I worked with a guy that he was sending emails out to the team and he was complaining because the team leader was not responding, was not doing the things that were suggested, recommended, required in those emails. And this is a bad one on the team leader, but the team lead said, I see your emails, and they're like 3-4 pages of just paragraphs of content. And he said, I look at it, I'd never really read all your emails, which bad on the team leader to do that, but it also bad on the guy that wrote it. It's, if you're writing something and these people need it, you need to write it in a way that is particularly something like that, where you've got key items that you want people to work with. You need to make sure that you learn how to write and communicate in a way that highlights those and draws those answers out of people. Big communication thing that, to be a better developer is regular status, is letting people know what you do. It is way too easy as a developer to just go off and write code and just disappear from off the face of the earth for a while, and then suddenly come back and you've got an application or a project done or something like that. keeping people involved is going to, or at least inform, particularly stakeholders, your boss, stuff like that, customers. That regular status really helps people understand what's inside that black box of assigning you a project and making you get it done. It is so helpful to yourself and to developers in general to unravel that a little bit and get people looking behind the curtains a little bit to see that, look, there's a lot that goes on with the requirements and the requests that are made. It's a CYA thing, but definitely document changes and goals. Once you set out requirements, if there's change requests that comes through, if something goes wrong, somebody challenges on it, it's nice to have the documentation to say, hey, look, this is why we did this. So that's the CYA part. But for yourself, it's very helpful as well. And I think almost critical, particularly as you get further in your career, it's really easy for things to get sort of muddled in your head because you'll find that there's conversations you have that you've had multiple times. And they, at least for me, they start running together a little bit. So making sure that there's clear documentation of what are we doing, why are we doing it, stuff like that is huge for getting across the finish line properly and not letting stuff fall through the cracks and not going out down some rabbit hole somewhere, adding a couple features that really take away maybe even from the solution. And then part of that communication getting better is just like you have code that you can refer back to as to build better code, have some reference projects and some templates that you use so that you can point to people and say, point people to it and say, hey, here's some of the things I've done. This is the typical quality of my work. But on the template side is have some things that allow you to quickly put together a status or a requirements document or a proposal or things like that. Is through the years, find things that are done, find proposals and various examples of these documents that are done in a way that impress you, and then steal it. Basically say, okay, I'm going to take that. I like how that's done. I'm going to use that format. You may want to make it your own a little bit, put your logo on it, stuff like that, but use that. You liked it, you were impressed with it, so use that to impress other people. And ideally, what will happen is you'll end up having your own special brand of template, for lack of a better term, that you've built by stealing the best ideas you've seen over the years. For myself, that's exactly how it grew up. I started with one that I liked, and I just stole it 100%. And then a year or two later, found a couple other things I liked. And so I modified what I was using to incorporate those. In a few years, same thing, found some more changes and made some more tweaks. And I still do it. Every year or two, I will go back to a lot of the stuff that I use the templates I use on a regular basis and review them, look at some of the stuff that I've been exposed to in that time period, and then make a few tweaks here and there, make some adjustments to constantly improve that as well. And those allow me, from the communication point of view, to communicate a lot better and faster. It's going to look better. I have my boilerplate, and I'm ready to go. And so it looks, and if you think about over the years, a lot of time has gone into it, but also, probably more importantly, is it looks like a lot of time went into it. So it doesn't feel like something that was just thrown together in a couple of seconds, because if you've invested in that communication, people are more likely to invest some time to read and respond to that communication. And this goes really dovetails right into the presentation side of it, is make sure that you have some branding, essentially, some sort of a personal brand of these documents and templates and your communication, a style, and create yourself logos or at least a signature line or something like that is you. So when people see it, they have a comfort level, particularly after your first communication or two, they just sort of know this is how this person communicates, and I know because of that, I know where to look for the key points. I know where to look for action items that are coming out of this communication. And part of all this is having that professional look and feel. Have fonts that look professional, have a style and white space and things like that make it feel professional, like it was something that was somebody put together and spent a little bit of time on to present it properly, as opposed to, something just slapped together. A simple example is the Developreneur presentations we do, is that we've got templates for different types of pages within these presentations. It allows us to quickly put some content together, but also have we've got a logo and we've got some color, some branding colors and stuff like that gives you a feel of, okay, somebody spent some time and thought about this, and this is how it gets presented. And if you don't like it, let us know. But it's one of those things where, you try to get something that gives a constant look and feel for your communications. Use the tools and the resources out there as much as possible. Things like Grammarly and even like Word or Excel or PowerPoint or Pages or Keynote, or all the tools that are out there for doing presentations and for finding images, stock images, even that kind of stuff. Is have have sort of a quiver full of some of those tools, so that you can actually put together a nice diagram if you need a diagram, or add a nice image if you need an image, or some sort of graph if you need a graph, or flow chart, or whatever it is you need. Is make sure that you sort of get a collection of those kinds of tools, so that you can have something that looks well, so that the communication fits the type of content that you're trying to communicate. Get a feel for white space and timing, and how you emphasize from a presentation, and even in general communication, when are the good times to have certain discussions. And this, particularly if you're in a long project, there's parts of the software development lifecycle that there's key concepts or key discussions you need to have in each of those steps or phases, but it doesn't make sense, or it's even confusing and it can detract from stuff to have those conversations in other phases. Dealing with the boss, there's things that, like, you can make recommendations or requests. Sometimes it's a really good request to make, and other times it's just like, it's not a good time to do it. And so that all comes back to, from a communication and presentation point of view, understand your audience. What are they looking for? What are they expecting? And then, as best you can, meet or exceed those expectations. And that's going to, take you leaps and bounds ahead in your ability to communicate and present. So, sort of wrapping this up a little bit, in a nutshell, what we've talked about. You want to always be moving forward. That is a key part of the philosophy. We talk about it all the time, getting some forward momentum and just keep it going. Doesn't have to be a whole lot, but as long as you're moving forward, at least you're better tomorrow than you were today. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I think it's almost fortunate. Never stop learning. There's always stuff to learn. This is a career, a lifestyle, a life choice, basically, that is one that you don't have to worry about ever getting bored. You don't have to worry about stuff getting old, because there's just always new stuff out there. There's always excuses to learn. I've been working with somebody that is very much at the end of their career. They're looking at retirement and, counting down their last days, and there's still stuff where they're constantly like, oh, wow, there's this cool thing here I really want to learn. Hey, this is something I can go play around with. It's just, that's the attitude you want to have all the way through, because if you do, that is going to help you become a better developer. If you don't have that itch, then it's probably going to be a challenge, because that is definitely a requirement to advance in this career. It goes back to always make sure you're looking for ways to provide value. That actually goes for any career, anywhere. If you're in a job and you're not adding value, then it's probably not going to be a job you're going to have very long. But I think it's worth stating it specifically, because it's easy for us to get sidetracked by the cool and the new and the shiny, as opposed to remembering our focus, keeping our eye on the prize of providing value to our customers. I've beaten this drum quite a bit, but just, to hit that drum one more time, kick that dead horse one more time, you got to solve problems. That is the focus of becoming a better developer, is you want to be able to solve bigger, better problems faster, higher quality, lower costs. That is the core of what we do. So that being said, I'll open up for questions and comments.
Hey, great presentation, Rob. I kind of wanted to interject when you were talking about spelling and comments and that, but I wanted to wait till the end. One other thing that you can do is you become a better developer, and I do this a little bit more than comments, but my code, because of how I name things and because I basically spell everything out, a lot of my code in and of itself is kind of self-documenting, and then all you have to do is add in essentially your Java docs to add the headers, and that's when people try to pull up, quick references to your code, they know what you're doing. If you do that well, and you, like you said, you follow the spelling, you really don't have to over-document at the end of the process. You're kind of documenting as you go.
Excellent point. That is a great approach to solving that problem. And it really does help to not have to get to the end and then go back and try to document stuff. If you can, it's a key point. If you can do that stuff as you're going, that's a great way to address that particular problem. And it, particularly if you're doing it, checking spelling and stuff like that, then anybody that's looking at any of your code is going to, see something that is what they would expect. So, and then particularly if you've got like APIs or anything where there's external users that are going to access your code and your method names or function names or anything like that, if they're misspelled, it just really looks crappy. So it's nice if you do that along the way, then it does save you some headaches at the end of that project or delivery. Other questions or comments? All right, hearing none. So what did we learn? What did we get out of this? What was the value that we should have, or the problem that we should have had solved in listening to this presentation? Well, number one, becoming a better developer, it's an approach to life. There's so much more of this, and that was what I really found in putting together the book, is there's a lot of stuff it's not necessarily in your primary job description, but it is the stuff that you probably have expected of you from your employers, but you should expect it of yourself. If you're going to get better, you're going to have stuff you're going to do that is just part of how you plan your work and how you plan some of your free time. The whole better thing, it's not becoming the best or whatever. That means it's, by definition, this is a goal that is going to always be ahead of you. This is something that every day you can get up and have this as a goal. And that forward progress thing points back to this of, as long as you make any forward progress on a given day, you get to the end of the day and say, hey, I can check this off. I became a better developer today. The bonus to all of this, never a dull moment. You will always have stuff to do. There's always work and learning, and a lot of it's fun. Should be, if you're in this career, it's fun stuff. There's cool, interesting things out there always. It's just there's constantly new stuff out there, so you don't have to worry about getting bored. That's for sure. And then the last thing I want to bring up is the whole being a better developer, being a developer, being somebody that solves problems well in a quality way and is able to communicate those. It's actually a pretty elite group. I've worked with hundreds of developers, if not thousands, over the years, and the developers that bring this to the table, that you just know that they are the kind of person they're becoming a better developer every day. They are providing value. They have that's a little more than a work ethic, but the pride of their work, the love of their work. There's not a lot of them. It's I would say 10% or less. But it's a great group to be a part of, because there is a huge amount of flexibility and job satisfaction that comes from the work that you put into, that you invest in yourself and in your career in doing this. So, although, it can be annoying and exhausting at times, I, for one, think it is more than worth the work. that being said, hopefully you got that value out of it. And as always, I just want to thank you for your time. I appreciate that. If you have any questions, comments, or anything like that, you can reach us on all the ways that we've always been around. So email at info@developreneur.com. Got a contact us page out on developreneur.com. Twitter at Developreneur. I've still got a Facebook page for the 3 people left using Facebook out there on Developreneur, facebook.com/Developreneur. As always, our goal is making every developer better, and hopefully a presentation like this has helped you achieve that goal for at least today or the last little bit that the time you've